Okay, we're going to try something new. Basically, I've got a lot of cramps where I have written way too much. Obviously, all those notes, and I've wasted so much paper. And I've killed so many trees. I feel so terrible. Plus, for some reason, every pen I write with rubs a blister on my index finger. So, I decided to try something different. And if you see me look over, it's not going to be as awkward as me looking upwards. So you either have an option of me looking over, or me looking upwards, or me looking down. So that's your only options. Well, now I know this video is for Thursday, and full disclosure, it's 18 till on Wednesday night. 18 till 10, by the way. I procrastinated a lot today, apparently, and where did the time go? I was waiting for a podcast to be released, never came out, so I'm going to have to eat really late. That's not a good thing, and that's pretty much what leads me to this. If I can help it, I'm going to utilize a new way to do these videos. I'm going to talk up the matches as best I can, but I'm not going to do as much play-by-play, because it's killing my wrist and my hand, and I don't want any more blisters. So we're going to try this to see what you guys think about it. So hopefully this will be a little bit more condensed. Let's talk about Impact from last week, London, England. So Gunner's backstage, and he is in search for the Cowboy James Storm after Storm basically cost him the TNA World Heavyweight Championship in the match against Magnus last week, or 2 weeks ago, technically. He basically says that Storm's a dead man when he shows up. He doesn't have a chance in hell. Dixie's not here this evening, so she has put Ethan Carter III, Magnus, and Bobby Roode in power. So they have the power to make matches. They don't really, but they do have the power. Start off the show with MVP making his way to the ring. He says, "Big things are poppin', and Dixie's BS is stoppin'. The half-man, half-amazing, jaw-dropping, modern-day Mac is back in London." Now, once he gets full control of TNA, he promises to give Gunner his rematch. So, nothing is going to stop him from righting that wrong. But since the championship was defended last week, Magnus will be defending the championship in the main event of Lockdown, which is this Sunday, against his challenger, and his challenger is Samoa Joe. Joe comes to the ring, and then Magnus comes to the ring. MVP asks where Magnus's sugar mama is, of course referring to Dixie. Magnus says Dixie is not here because Magnus reminded her that this city is not what it used to be, due to people like MVP. The city has degenerated into crime and debauchery. It's gone to hell ever since Magnus left. Now, MVP makes a comment and basically says that, you know, honestly, when it comes down to it, you like to throw out your own Magnus rules. Well, at Lockdown, it's not going to matter, because Magnus rules are not in effect. Joe's rules will be. And if you ask what Samoa Joe's rules are, basically, the only ways you can win are submission or knockout. So Joe signs the contract. Magnus is a little bit reluctant, and smartly so. Reminds Joe that he has a whole bag of tricks he hasn't even used yet. He says Joe's unrefined. He's a dangerous animal. And that's why the people incessantly chant, "Joe's gonna kill you." Remember this. What do they do to dangerous animals? They put them down. Magnus, on the other hand, is an articulate, refined representative of the industry. This is the reason why Joe will never again represent TNA as the World Heavyweight Champion. Magnus signs the contract. They stare down. And basically they start brawling. Joe works Magnus over in the corner and starts beating the daylights out of him. MVP watches on. The referees hit the ring. Pat Kenny hits the ring. Al Snow hits the ring. They separate them. And MVP tells Joe to basically save it for the cage. He chases Magnus up the ramp and continues the beating. So, we open up the show with a really nice segment. No Dixie, so obviously a lot of fans would be happy on this. And Magnus is basically setting his own rules. MVP doesn't like this and says, you know what, your rules don't apply. We're going to go with Joe's rules. I don't know how that's even, but I guess it makes sense given the fact how Magnus has defended the championship. These are MVP's words, not mine. And basically, because of that fact, we're doing Joe's rules instead. So that you can't win by pinfall. You can't win by... Obviously, it's a cage match. No countout, no disqualification. The only way it can end is a knockout or a submission. So basically, Magnus, in order to retain the championship, has to either knock Joe out or tap Joe out. Two things that don't look very promising at this point. So, this sets up our main event for Lockdown this Sunday. Now, before we get our next match of the evening, we get some fan cam footage, or some Impact 365 footage in this case, of the win by the Wolves over the Bromans for the TNA World Tag Team Championships at a house show in Morgantown, West Virginia. So, after this, the Bromans basically are looking for a little bit of revenge. And in order to get revenge, they got to get on Team Rude at Lockdown. And yes, for those of you that watch any of my WWE videos, you understand I don't like the word team oh so much. But in this case, it actually makes sense. The Lockdown teams make sense to call them Team A and Team B. It makes sense. So, basically, they bull rush Bobby Roode's locker room, and they want a piece of the action. They want the Wolves, and the only way they can get them is by getting onto Team Rude. Bobby's like, well, Bad Influence wanted to get on my team too, and they lost. And you just lost the tag team titles. So you know what? We're going to make a match. It's going to be Bad Influence versus the Bromans versus the Wolves. And if you guys win, you're in Team Rude. If Bad Influence wins, they're in Team Rude. If the Wolves win, then the search continues. Obviously, Bobby only wants to surround himself with winners. So the winning heel team, provided there is a winning heel team in this three-way dance, is going to end up on Team Rude. Now, right into it, we go into a non-title match, three-way dance. It's the Bromans, the Wolves, and Bad Influence. So, basically, they go for a double suplex on Davey Richards, and he goes for an enziguri kick. Daniels catches the foot, he ducks out of the way, and Kaz eats the enziguri. Tagging to Eddie Edwards, and he hits a backdrop suplex into a sit-out facebuster. Looks awesome. 1-2, and Kaz kicks out. So, the Bad Influence end up doing the double hip toss, caught him, and throw him up in the air into the Viano Special, which is the powerbomb sit-out version and reverse neck breaker combo. That gets a 2 count. So, Edwards ends up catching Kaz out of the corner with the chin checker, the backpack stunner, or the Taliban backpack, or whatever you want to call it, over the shoulder, boulder holder, depending on who's calling your match. And that gets a 2 because the Bromans end up making the save. Edwards with the tope onto Daniels, and he hits the double boot stomp onto the back of Kaz. Richards goes up top, and Robbie E tags himself in, hits the frog double stomp, and Robbie ends up tossing Richards to the floor, takes the pin over Kaz, and the Bromans are now on Team Rude. I don't have an issue with this, given the fact that the Bromans right now won back the tag team championships, and basically they are currently defending them. So, obviously this had nothing to do with this, because this was shot way before any of that happened. Bromans won the TNA Tag Team Championships on the Outbreak one-night only pay-per-view that they're doing in Japan with Wrestle 1, which was over the weekend. And I don't know if that's going to be mentioned tonight on Impact or not. I think it probably will be, given the fact that we're leading towards the matches at Lockdown. And actually, I want to talk about the matches at Lockdown, but I have to find them, because you know what? I probably should have paid attention with this, but I didn't. Sorry. So yeah, I have the card for Lockdown, and another title ended up changing hands, which was the X Division Championship. And Seiya Sanada ended up taking the X Division Championship off Austin Aries. He will be a part of Lockdown as well. So the Wrestle 1 TNA connection does continue. So Ethan Carter III basically gets to pick his own opponent tonight because Aunt D told him that he could do that. Obviously, he's partially in charge. He's going to expose the truth about Kurt Angle when Angle goes into the Hall of Fame. He says he plans to become the new face of American wrestling. So we see Bobby Roode and Austin Aries. They're talking about, obviously, the so-called fluke when Aries won the World Heavyweight Championship. They talk about Lockdown and the importance surrounding the match, and Aries basically can't trust MVP. Aries calls Roode's bluff and says, you know what, I can't really trust you either. This is all about not Dixie Carter and Dixie Carter running the company. This is about you getting their 10% of TNA. Bobby says, you need to make the right decision. Aries says, I always make the right decision. So EC3 comes out, and he announces his opponent. Basically, what he does, he comes out, and before he's ready to announce his opponent, he decides he wants to rip on the UK and says the United States will win the World Cup in soccer. Yes, he uses the American term soccer instead of calling it football. And he will defeat this challenger tonight. It ends up being Doug Williams, which is pretty awesome, because we're going to see Doug Williams in a minute in TNA. So Williams starts working away with right hands and stiff European uppercuts. He nails a spinning back elbow off the ropes, which kind of looked like a spinning back elbow, kind of looked like a European uppercut off the ropes, depending on how you look at it. Uppercuts and right hands, and the crowd's really into Doug Williams. Knee strike in the corner. Ethan Carter III fires back, a boot in by Williams. He goes up top, and he's going for Chaos Theory. Counter by EC3, and he goes for it again, and EC3 catches him with a mule kick downstairs with a low blow, and he nails the 1%er away from the hard cam. It looks very interesting, because you'd think you'd want to see EC3 plant Doug Williams with the 1%er, like, facing the cam. No. We saw the back. It's kind of like how the crowd got to see it. Some of the crowd facing away from the hard cam got to see this match. So that was the finish right there. EC3 wins, and I'm happy to see Doug Williams in the ring. Hopefully TNA will bring him back. So after the match is over, he attacks Doug Williams, stomps away at the knee, locks on the knee bar. Of course, we're playing up what he did to Kurt Angle. So Cowboy James Storm arrives to the building. He comes to the ring and he says he doesn't run or hide. If Gunner wants to know why he did what he did, he's right here. He's going to tell him face-to-face, man-to-man. Gunner comes down to the ring. Gunner's got fire in his eyes, and Storm basically is like, whoa, hear me out, bro. Now, Gunner just wants to bash his head in, so obviously he's not thinking. Storm says he did screw him last week out of the World Heavyweight Championship. And it was all planned out ever since Gunner stole the Feast or Fired briefcase away from him. Storm wanted Gunner to know just how it felt to have something taken away from you. And Gunner handed him the tag team title shot briefcase. Basically like it was scraps to a dog. Cowboy James Storm doesn't take a backseat to anyone. Storm says Gunner was nothing before they teamed up. And Gunner used him to make a name for himself. And not once did Gunner ever thank him. Basically, Gunner worked for everything he ever gotten. He stood by Storm, and basically the reason that Storm can sit home and drink ice-cold beer is because of Gunner and others like him. Storm basically called him a robot, which made me laugh hysterically, if people know me legitimately, and says nobody cares about Gunner. Gunner says, my friends, my family cared. Storm says no one owes you a damn thing. I love this, by the way. If you know me for real, you understand why. Gunner attacks, they brawl, Storm grabs a chair, tries to swing it, Gunner ducks out of the way, and he bombs out through the crowd. We come back from break, and Gunner basically says that he's going to stand there and wait at the door because there's only one way to get back here, and once Storm comes that way, he's going to have to go through Gunner. So we get Magnus in the ring, and he basically says he's a little agitated because Joe cheap shotted him. So Magnus found somebody to take care of him. Not here in London, not in the UK, not whatsoever. No, he decided he wanted to find someone in Germany. And he brings out the winner of the online gut check, which was Bad Bones. So we get Bad Bones facing off against a very pissed off Samoa Joe. So Joe gets to the ring, and Bones attacks him from the bell. We get snap jabs back into the corner, and vicious knee strikes, the face wash, the Otani boot scrape, and he sets him on the top. Muscle buster, locks on a rear naked choke, and Bones is done. So basically, Joe wanted to send a message. Magnus tried to send a message that Joe was infallible, and Joe basically just made him eat his words. So, just like Austin Aries met with Bobby Roode, he's obviously has to meet with MVP, because he has to be torn, right? So this is the next segment here. He says, you know what, I feel so popular, I might as well run for president. How about Aries 2020? And MVP's like, you know what, we'll worry about your political aspirations later on. I need a decision on the lockdown team. Aries is on the fence. He basically says that Bobby Roode would do anything to get him on his team, which means I believe that you do the same. You can't trust anybody here. Aries says it's not about the money. He just wants to be the greatest. He wants MVP to prove his greatness, and he wants to see things up close and personal. He wants to be the referee for the main event. So MVP wants to know what's going to help stop him from getting screwed by Aries. Aries basically says, you need to trust me. So MVP takes a chance and makes him the referee. And he says, you know what, you need to prepare yourself because Bobby's the real deal. Once again, setting the turn in motion. It's already started, folks, and it's about to be complete. So this was supposed to happen back at Bound for Glory in October, but this is officially Kurt Angle's Hall of Fame ceremony. I understand the irony of inducting an Olympic gold medalist, an American Olympic gold medalist in London, England, is quite intriguing. I don't have an issue with this because the crowd was a lot more hot than they would have been at Bound for Glory. No offense to people in Arizona, it's still the fact that this crowd was a lot hotter. And the UK, overall, by and large, are a lot hotter for TNA's product. And it's always been that way. If TNA could relocate to the United Kingdom, they would be able to be a lot better off. And would be a legitimate potential contender to Vince's empire in the UK, of course. Not necessarily in the world, but in the UK. And that's a good market to start with. So Jeremy Borash comes out, and this is, of course, the induction ceremony of Kurt Angle. Talking about overcoming the broken frickin' neck, his arrival in TNA. There's a great video package about his career. Angle comes to the ring, and JB basically welcomes him to the TNA Hall of Fame. He gives him the gold Rolex, they hug, and Angle grabs the mic. He thanks the fans for their ovation, and he says it's an honor. This isn't about him or TNA, it's about the fans. Because without the fans, TNA would not exist. Without the fans, professional wrestling would not exist. He was supposed to accept this at Bound for Glory, but he didn't think he was in the best of places, both physically and mentally, and personally and professionally. He said he had to do some soul-searching and change some things about himself, and after 4 months, he is now ready to accept it here in London, England. He got himself clean, all his matches with Bobby Roode. He wanted to thank everybody that helped. He thanks God, his wife, who is his rock, of course, his children, who he wants to make proud of him, the amazing talent in the back, and each and every single one of the fans. Tonight is a great night to be Kurt Angle. God bless. Ethan Carter III interrupts. Making mock tears, obviously. A lot of crocodile tears from EC3 here. He just so happens to have a touching tribute video of his own. Now, it's done very comedically, and it looks a lot like a comic strip with like word bubbles and everything, and it's really funny. So, basically, he is depriving the fans of the big news. And Angle's like, what's your big news? What's this big news you're talking about? And he'd be like, oh, by all means, come to the ring and tell me this big news. So, he goes to the podium. EC3 pulls out a piece of paper, which in giant letters says, I beat Sting, and in parentheses says, and hurt Kurt. He says he has a report on the internet, of course, because the internet is right 50% of the time. And he basically says that Angle suffered an MCL and an ACL injury due to the savage attack from Ethan Carter III, and may never be able to perform again. He apologizes and says, you know what, that just kind of got out of hand rather quickly. He just wanted to send a message, but out of respect to Kurt Angle, he feels that he should retire. Well, Angle asks why he would even get in the ring when he knows that he would be without a throw because Angle would rip it out. Carter says his knee is torn up, and unless there's an Olympic sport for gimping, I like that line, that's hilarious, he would be able to get away had he need to. He basically says you need to go to the source to confirm this. EC3 says the internet is always right 50% of the time. Doing his best Brian Fantana here. 50% of the time, it's right. Every time. So, Angle says the source is correct 100% of the time. And the source is him. But he's got news for Ethan Carter III. No torn MCL. No torn ACL. Do you really want to be in this ring right now? Carter noticeably gulps and says, I really don't. Angle's like, look, you're new here. And like everyone before you, and probably people long after you, you're trying to make a name for yourself. I get it. I understand. But really, why would you want to try to make a name for yourself against Kurt Angle? He punches him in the mouth. Carter goes to the floor. Angle's limping noticeably. And basically, he says, cut my music, because of course his music starts prematurely. He says MVP gave him a gift for being in the Hall of Fame. A chance to pick his opponent at Lockdown. Inside a steel cage, he chooses Ethan Carter III. I like this. I like this a lot. This is going to be a huge rub for Carter on Sunday when he defeats Kurt Angle. Regardless how it happens, it's going to be pretty much reminiscent of when Nigel McGuinness first came in as Desmond Wolfe when they did the storyline with Angle. Same thing. They had him face off against each other in a cage. They're doing the same thing with Ethan Carter III. And I think the upside for Ethan Carter III is staggering right now. I really like this gimmick. I've always liked this gimmick, and I probably always will like this gimmick. The former Derek Bateman has flourished since coming into TNA, and you know what? It's actually the right place for him to be. To be totally honest, it is the absolute right place for him to be. And I like the way it goes, to be totally honest. I have to get the name here of something here. Hold on, where are you? What's the finisher name? Okay, good. Yay, thank you, Twitter. So, EC3 and Kurt Angle on a collision course at Lockdown. Should be pretty good. It would be better if Angle wasn't hurt, but you get the good with the bad, right? So, of course, we go to a tag team match, Knockouts tag team action. Lady Tapa and the Alpha Female, of course, debuted officially as Chris Sabin's new, I can't say girl, maybe main squeeze, business partner? Yeah, business associate, we'll go with that. And, of course, Gail Kim is in their corner, and they're taking on the 2/3 of the beautiful people. Yeah, shout out to Angelina Love. In Madison Rayne, the current reigning and defending Knockouts champion, and Velvet Sky. And by the way, for those of you that understand me, know that I'm a big fan of Velvet Sky, but I'm a bigger fan of Madison Rayne. I think Madison Rayne is easily the best looking female in TNA, and I know a lot of people will fight me on this, but in my opinion, Madison Rayne is the gold standard. I like Velvet Sky, I really do. I think she's gorgeous, but I think Madison Rayne is stunning. And seeing her do Velvet's Pigeons entrance, yeah, that was over with me. So, now that Sir Owen Disney proves he's a man, we're going to talk about this match, and it was really short. Basically, Sabin jumps on the apron midway through the match. Velvet Sky brings him in the ring the hard way, which basically means shakes the ropes, pulls it forward, so Sabin flips into the ring. And goes for in yo face, which, again, shout out to my old backyard wrestling finisher. Alpha Female attacks from behind, tagging a Lady Tapa, tagging a Madison Rayne, and Madison with a drop kick, repeated kicks to the hamstring, Tapa with a slam into the corner, and slams her into the mat. Tapa goes to the second rope, leaps off, going for a big splash. Madison rolls out of the way, makes a cover. Sabin's got the referee. Gail Kim with a cheap shot from behind. Toppa with a TKO, and that's the end right there. So Sabin gets in the ring for celebration. Velvet goes after him. Alpha Female attacks, puts her in the full Nelson. And Toppa and Kim have got Madison Rayne beating her down in the corner. ODB comes out to make the save. Tosses Chris Sabin herself and clotheslines Toppa over the top rope to the floor. Sabin pulls the Alpha Female out before she can get hit with In Yo Face, and that's the end of the segment. So, I think as soon as we get a guy to go with Madison Rayne and Velvet Sky, we're probably going to end up doing a 4-on-4. Now, obviously, the correct answer here, with the way history goes, would definitely be Alex Shelley, but they're not going that way, because I believe Alex Shelley is still under contract in Japan. So, until that happens, until that ceases, obviously we can't go this direction. So, I think what we're going to do is we're going to see Lady Toppa, Alpha Female, and Gail Kim against ODB, Madison Rayne, and Velvet Sky. And eventually we're going to get another babyface male thrown into this. Actually, I got a great way to do it. The only thing is, he's kind of tied up with Joseph Park / Abyss right now. I think if you really play on the fact that they're still married, we use Showtime Eric Young in this storyline. So we do Showtime, Madison, Velvet, and ODB against... long day, sorry. Chris Sabin, Lady Toppa, Gail Kim, and Alpha Female. I think that's what we do. I think we do a mixed 8-person tag match. And that ends up not on Lockdown, but I know it'll end up on an Impact. I think that's probably the direction we're going. We get a promo for Tiger Uno, who of course is the former AAA star Extreme Tiger, who actually got to work a really awesome dark match against said Eric Young in when I went to TNA Impact last December. One of the last Impact taping before the ones that are coming up starting this month at Universal. So the one that me and Joe went to. But yeah, Tiger Uno is coming, and it's going to be a really nice breath of fresh air for the X Division. Given the fact, like I said, we have a brand new X Division champion in Saya Sonata from Wrestle 1, and I'm sure that's going to be talked about in the near future if it's not discussed tonight on Impact. So, we get Samuel Shaw, who I'm starting to like more and more each day. He plays smarmy oh so well. He just he's creepy. He really is. He says that Christy was in trouble last week, so he saw this and he helped her out. He would do anything to help her, and he's now going to prove that. He comes to the ring. Christy is, of course, sitting at ringside. She doesn't look too happy to see him, obviously. Basically, he pulls out a Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that, "To be great is to be misunderstood." Christy misunderstood his actions. He asked her to come to the ring. She's like, "Nah, I ain't doing that." He's like, "You know what? I've respected your space, and I want to clear all this up right in the center of the ring." She reluctantly gets in the ring. Shaw says, "You know what? I enjoyed our time together. And I think deep down inside, so did you. Now, I have respected your space. But you know what? There are men out there that won't respect your space. I see how they look at you. How they lust for you. I'm simply here to be your knight in shining armor, here to protect you. Those men want one thing. You know that thing that One Direction talk about all the time? But he wants more. He wants it all. He wants everything." Here comes Mr. Anderson. Civilian attire and sporting a black eye from the attack last week on Impact. Basically, he says, before anything starts, before he can say anything, Shaw says, "You know what, him, Ken Anderson, he's one of those guys that wants one thing," you know, the One Direction thing. Christy is absolutely lucky that Samuel Shaw was there for her. Anderson says, "Sam, shut up." Calls him a creepy bastard, and the fans of London follow suit. He says, "Your little relationship with Christy, it's not real. It's a figment of your imagination. What's real is how about I give you a real ass whooping tonight?" Well, Shaw says he's not creepy. Doesn't say he's not a bastard, he says he's not creepy. He's been nothing but a perfect gentleman when it comes to Christy. But even if he were to do something to her, she would be receptive towards it. Because you know what? Women like Christy Hemme, they're always available. Hemme looks on shocked and slaps Shaw in the face. Anderson hits the ring, and he uses her as a human shield. Shaw tosses Christie into Mr. Anderson, and then he locks on his choke, which is the Katagatami. He fights out, he fights it, and Shaw just drags him to the mat, choking Anderson out. The fans are chanting, "Creepy bastard," and that's how we go home. Remember how I said that Shaw's going to get his first storyline opponent out of this? Yeah, and it's official now. He'll be facing Mr. Anderson, most likely on Impact. Not the one, maybe the Impact that I'm going to be talking about tonight, actually. To be totally honest. No, I think it's already taped. The next Impact after Lockdown. This coming Thursday. Not the one that's today's Impact. Next week's Impact. I think they'll actually do that match. Because they don't have enough time to do it for Lockdown. They could have done it for Lockdown, but I guess they didn't have enough time. We get another promo for Will-O-the-Wisp, and Jeff Hardy looking more and more creepy by the day. He's got the auto-tune voice and the voice changer, and he's got the creepy black and white. He's got the Penguin's umbrella. He's like in an abandoned house in the middle of the woods. I mean, I like Jeff Hardy. I'm not necessarily sure how Willow's going to go over. Don't forget, Willow was the gimmick that was booed out of the building in Ring of Honor. Now, granted, I know the crowds are not exactly the same, but still. And the question is, the final member of MVP's team at Lockdown, will it end up being Willow, or will it be Jeff Hardy? We're going to find out probably tonight. Obviously, we have to find out tonight, because Lockdown is this Sunday. So James Storm finally has gotten through the locker room, and he is about ready to exit. And of course, who's at the exit? Gunner. So they start fighting, and they are brawling outside of the arena in what looks to be a parking garage. So Al Snow and Pat Kenny once again have to separate the two. Gunner promises Storm will be done at Lockdown. This is being done with a steel grate, like a cage, foreshadowing, in front of James Storm. And after this is said, Storm gets the last word and says, basically, talk about your God. Sooner or later, he's going to cut you down. Johnny Cash line for the win. So, it's made official for Lockdown. We get Gunner and Cowboy James Storm inside a steel cage. So much animosity between the two. It's going to come to a head this Sunday in Miami. So, of course, 3 weeks ago, Eric Young did unmask Abyss. And Abyss said, very famously, he's going to go find someone who understands him. Someone that would fix things. Obviously, hopefully, we're talking about Father James Mitchell. That's the right answer. Eric Young hasn't heard from Abyss, but he does need some help. All he knows is that we better hope that the guy that showed up, that he was in the ring with, doesn't show up and come back in TNA. Austin Aries comes to the ring to his own music, and he's wearing a referee shirt, and I would say his wrestling tights. That's what they are, basically. So, yeah. Main event time. The two captains of Team Rude and Team Dixie at Lockdown do battle in the main event. It's Bobby Roode taking on MVP, and we go midway through this match. He comes off the ropes, Rude with a boot, and off the middle rope with the flying guillotine or the blockbuster, depending on how you call it. Somersault neck snap off the middle rope. So this goes for the cover, 1-2, and MVP kicks out. Suplex by Bobby Roode, and Roode goes to the leaping knee drop. MVP out of the way, MVP with the snap jabs, big right hand, and he goes in the corner. Repeated clotheslines in the corner, and rights and lefts. MVP with a modified high collar T-bone or exploder suplex, depending on how you want to call it. Kips up, hits a chin breaker, and Bobby Roode is down. He goes for the ball and elbow, he connects, and a perfect plex, which is kind of insult to injury given the fact that Bobby Roode was using it as a finish back in the It Factor start of the gimmick. So, turnabout is fair play, I guess. 1-2 and a kick out. MVP goes for the playmaker, Bobby Roode counters out, gets caught with a boot by MVP, and he nails the playmaker this time, awkwardly, 1-2 and a kick out. He argues with Aries about the cadence of his count, and Roode goes for the Roode bomb. MVP elbows his way out and nails... an enziguri kick. Rude with the Northern Lariat, gets countered with a basement drop kick to the knee. MVP goes for the Shining Wizard, and Aries mows him over with a rolling elbow, and that's all she wrote. Fans are booing incessantly. Rude with the Rude Bomb, and that's all she wrote. 1, 2, 3, Bobby Roode wins over MVP, and we now have an official final member of Team Rude at Lockdown, and that is the X Division champion at this time, Austin Aries. I don't think he'll be announced the X Division champion. I don't know. It's anyone's guess if they're going to bring up the fact that Sonata won the championship from him at the Wrestle 1 Outbreak One Night Only pay-per-view, because it hasn't happened yet. So who knows if they're going to go that direction or not. Good match. Good match between the two. I very much enjoyed it. So, an okay edition of Impact. It was all about setting the stage for Lockdown, obviously. We are going into Lockdown this Sunday. We have one more event to go, and that's the one that's going to be talked about tonight, actually. Yeah, I'm actually going to try to do a video. It's going to be either tonight, which I'm not sure yet, because we're now going to 300 now. The Rise of an Empire, I believe that's what it's called. The 300 prequel, we're actually going to that now. So I'll get out a little bit after 10, and you'll probably get this recap sometime Friday, because I'm going to have a lot of time to kill. I got a SmackDown review to do, and I've also got Impact to do, so we'll do that. And then, of course, we've got Lockdown on Sunday, which I'll recap for Monday morning. That's pretty much how we're going to do this from now on. I like this. It actually worked pretty well. So, we have our official matches for Lockdown. Before I go into anything else, I do want to say, matches for this show, check out the Bromans against Bad Influence and the Wolves. I wish it would have been given more than, almost 6 minutes, but it was good for what it was. I was nice seeing Doug Williams in the ring, Kurt Angle's Hall of Fame ceremony, and the subsequent interruption from Ethan Carter III. I had no issues with that. And I like the main event. I like the storyline that we've got progressing with James Storm and Gunner. I think they're really going to tear into each other on Sunday, and that's the right move. I like what they're doing with Samuel Shaw, and the fact that Mr. Anderson is now Christy Hemi's knight in shining armor. And that all works really well for me. I like the turn from Aries as the Dirty Heels are back together again. So let's talk about Lockdown, shall we? Before we go any further, we got 7 matches heading into Lockdown this Sunday. Miami, Florida, home of MVP. Live on pay-per-view, 8 o'clock this Sunday night. And it's officially been announced, apparently, that I was misinformed. So it sounds to me like, let me check, because Wikipedia isn't always reliable, if you will. So I want to make sure from the TNA website what the Lockdown pay-per-view... Okay, we're good. So yeah, it's official, and I was not aware of this. It is a match for Lockdown. These will all be taking place inside the steel cage. We're going back to gimmick pay-per-views yet again, back in TNA's heyday. So all take place inside the steel cage. We have the clash between Samuel Shaw and Mr. Ken Anderson. That's going to take place inside a steel cage. There is going to be a 6-man inter-promotional tag team steel cage match as TNA's team of Chris Sabin, Christopher Daniels, and Frankie Kazarian, the Bad Influence, take on the Wrestle 1 tandem of Tiger Uno's debut, the new X Division champion, Saya Sonata, and the Great Muta. Yes, Muta will be making his TNA debut at Lockdown. You're also going to see the Olympic gold medalist, the Cyborg Kurt Angle, take on Ethan Carter III. Cowboy James Storm takes on Gunner. Madison Rayne defends the Knockouts Championship against Gail Kim. And in the double main event, Lethal Lockdown will apply as MVP's team of the Wolves, MVP himself, and a person to be announced, who have we potentially heard it's going to be Jeff Hardy, take on Dixie Carter's handpicked team, captained by the It Factor Bobby Roode. He teams with the Bromans, Jesse Goddard, and Robbie E., as well as the greatest man who ever lived, Austin Aries. And this match has so many implications that if Dixie wins, Bobby Roode becomes 10% owner of the company. And if MVP wins, he gets complete control over wrestling operations of Impact Wrestling. So much stuff on the line. And in the main event, Magnus will put the TNA World Heavyweight Championship on the line against his former tag team championship partner and #1 contender, the Samoan submission machine Samoa Joe, in a Joe Rules match, which means knockout or submission is the only way to win. That is TNA Lockdown this Sunday from Miami, and this card is stacked. I'm very much looking forward to this pay-per-view. So, hopefully you enjoyed this new form of the video, and instead of me looking upward or looking downward, I looked to the side, so it wasn't as hard. And I want to give a shout out to 411 Mania for helping me with the recap, and they're actually, I just used a lot of what they wrote, and I will shout out the writer of this article, which was Larry Zonka, or Sonka, depending on what is your pronunciation. So yeah, that was Impact this week, or last week, and it was a good show. It really was. I very much enjoyed myself. Everything's really falling into place for Lockdown, and it makes total sense. And tonight we get the final pieces of the puzzle, and later this weekend I'll be recapping that. WWE fans, you can join me, of course, for SmackDown later this weekend, and also we're going to be talking Raw on Tuesday, and NXT on Wednesday, and of course we go back to Impact on Thursday. So I will be a week behind on everything, is basically what it is. Unless I have more time, I will be a week behind on everything. And I'm sorry about that, but I guess it's how it's going to be for a little bit, until the schedule kind of works itself out. But don't worry, you always know you're going to have content on Pop every single day. So that was Impact for last week, and I'll talk about Impact this week, later this week. In the meantime, if you like these videos, tell your friends about them, leave a comment, do subscribe, and help spread the word about Pop if you'd like to like our Facebook fan page at Sir Owen Disney Pop. If you want to be my friend on Facebook, it's Owen Disney. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's at Sir Owen Disney. Last but certainly not least, you want to send your thoughts, comments, queries, and opinions, things you'd like to see on Pop, new versus ideas, things you'd like to see me review, things you'd like to see me talk about. You have any questions about my opinions on things? If you think I need to do a weekly wrestling podcast instead of do updates on every single show, then let me know. It's SirOwenDisney@gmail.com. In the meantime, thank you guys and girls out there for watching, and until tomorrow, boys and girls, that's all I got to say about that.